Hello and welcome to episode 58 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, we'll be looking back 2 years to the closure of Walt Disney World due to the pandemic. At first, Sarah from Seattle and I will be talking about our differing perspectives on that time when I was actually at Walt Disney World and she was seeing things unfold from the other end of the country. After that, Marisa from Chicago will be back to talk about the changes at Walt Disney World since reopening. The two of us will go over which changes we like, don't like, or still need to give more time. We understand that this isn't the happiest of topics, but we aren't coming at it from a depressing place. We're just remembering our experiences and talking about life moving forward. Right now, we'll get things started with Sarah from Seattle. As always, thanks for being here, Sarah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
So we're about to hit the 2-year anniversary of the closure at Walt Disney World due to the pandemic, and it was such a strange time. And as we look back 2 years later at everything that happened, I just thought we would have a conversation about the fact that I was there, I was experiencing a lot of this stuff on the ground, but then Sarah was watching it from across the country, and we sort of have different perspectives about what was going on when the parks closed. So first of all, Sarah, I know that you like to go to the theme parks as much as possible, and especially at that time you were going fairly regularly. Did you have any trips planned that ended up getting canceled?
Thankfully, no. We had definitely been thinking of taking our son to Disney for the first time. So we had in the back of our minds, but thankfully we hadn't actually booked anything because that was kind of my biggest worry when I saw it was like, oh, dang it. I'm so glad we didn't have all this stuff booked because I know that like heartache so many people went through and that I heard about from social media and personal friends that it was really it was so sad. But I personally thankfully did not have anything booked at that time. So that was a plus. You were saying, though, that you were there that the day they announced it. So how did that feel being in the park when they announced that?
So just like this year, 2022, last week Epcot started the International Flower and Garden Festival. Well, 2 years ago, back in 2020, we were also in the first full week of Epcot's International Flower and Garden Festival. I was there on Thursday, March the 12th. That just so happened to be the day they announced the parks were going to be closing. I started the day hitting a couple food booths, taking pictures, filling you guys in on social media and all that stuff. But I had a friend who was actually in town from Pennsylvania, and he was over at Disney's Hollywood Studios. So I park hopped over to Disney's Hollywood Studios. I took the Disney Skyliner. I went over there and I met up with him at Studios. I saw people had started wearing masks. And this was at the time when like the CDC was saying that they didn't think people needed to wear masks because they were trying to save masks for people who were in danger. So you saw people wearing masks and you were like, oh, they're silly. They're not paying attention.
Right, right.
But they were paying attention. I'm not putting down anybody for doing anything for their own safety or for the safety of their family. But it was such a weird vibe because I remember like I had fast passes. And I was like, oh, I don't have to go back to Epcot to use my fast passes. I'll just stay here and hang out with my friend. And I was thinking I can just use these fast passes whenever I want. I get to make 7 days worth of fast passes every month. So it's not a big deal if I let this Living with the Land expire. And I remember that he was planning on going to Animal Kingdom that following Monday, which ended up being the first day of the closure. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll come back and I'll hang out with you a little bit at Animal Kingdom. And I know the secret to getting a Flight of Passage Fast Pass in the middle of the day. And, maybe we can ride Flight of Passage and that'll be fun. And just not really fully understanding what was about to happen. I remember the reason I was specifically there on that day was Walt Disney World was going to give travel agents tours of some of the resort rooms for our social medias. And they had canceled that earlier in the week, but I had already taken off of my job and all that kind of stuff. So I still went that day. and I decided to go over to Caribbean Beach on the Skyliner and walk around and take pictures for my own social media. And the one thing I saw that was funny in kind of a macabre way was all these dads who were getting back to Caribbean Beach with cases of beer. Because I think they were preparing for the announcement that the parks were going to be closing. And they were like, I'm not going to get stranded here with no theme parks and no beer. So they were just carrying cases and cases into their hotel rooms, which I thought was a little bit funny. So this was also the first week or so of Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway.
That's right.
And I hadn't ridden it yet. So I was walking out of Disney's Hollywood Studios, and I saw that there was an 80-minute wait for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. And in my mind, I thought, boy, do I want to wait 80 minutes? But then I thought, I haven't ridden it yet. I'll just get into this line and suck it up. So I got into an 80-minute queue for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. By the time I got on the ride, I had notifications on my phone that baseball was postponing the spring training season and the start of the regular season. I got a notification that the NBA was postponing their season, that they were canceling March Madness and the NCAA tournament in college basketball. I had all of these things get canceled while I was in the queue for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Then I rode it for the first time, and it was awesome, and I am so glad that I decided to wait because I wouldn't have gotten to experience it until the parks reopened months and months later. I got off the ride. I headed back to Epcot. I just had to walk through Epcot to get back to my car, which was in the parking lot. And I was just about to step through the exit that actually means you're not in Epcot anymore. And I heard a woman behind me say, "Oh, that's not good. They just announced they're closing Disneyland." And I still held out hope that they were going to keep Walt Disney World open. And by the time I got home, they had announced that Walt Disney World was also closing. I think some people criticize us Disney fans. They call us Disney adults, and they act like we think it's too important. We know exactly how important these things are in the scope of real life. But I think one of the things that is underappreciated is Disney doesn't close for that long. Disney closed for like a day and a half for 9/11, and they announced that they were going to be closed for 2 weeks. And it ended up being months that they were closed. They don't cancel the NCAA basketball season. When these things were being canceled, I don't think people were freaking out because they weren't getting to go to theme parks, or they weren't getting to watch basketball, or they weren't able to watch baseball. I think they were freaking out because these things don't close. These things don't cancel. Disney is open on Christmas. Disney is open on Easter. Disney is open on Thanksgiving. These are the most crowded days at Disney, and they are closing because of this thing. I think it really helped put things in perspective about how big of a deal this was and what was happening. And I do think a lot of people criticized us like we were upset because we weren't getting to go ride Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway anymore. But that wasn't it. It was the uncertainty. If this was such a big deal that Walt Disney World closed.
Yeah, exactly.
Then that made it feel a lot more real. Just a few weeks before the closure, I ran in the Princess Half Marathon at Walt Disney World, and my plan for that day was for my wife Courtney and her friend Jen, who were having birthdays. And yes, it was also my friend Jillian's birthday. Love you, Jillian. Okay. I didn't want her to be left out. We also met up with her at the park. But before I met up with all of them at the park, I was going to go to LA Fitness because I have an LA Fitness membership, shower, and then head back to the parks. But there was a big accident on I-4, big surprise, and I wasn't able to get to the LA Fitness. In retrospect, I can't believe I did this. I just changed in a Wawa bathroom, something I would absolutely never do now. To think about how much times have changed since then is just unbelievable. We were leaving Magic Kingdom that night after the half marathon. I used the bathroom at the TTC, and I heard a dad say to his kid, "Why did you go and touch that? Now you're going to have to," and he corrected himself a little bit and was like, wash your hands even harder. But you could tell that he was going to say, why did you touch that? Now you have to wash your hands. And then to think of a couple months later when I was back at the theme parks and how people were obsessively washing their
Mhm.
hands. The world really, really changed, and Walt Disney World just serves as kind of a microcosm of that. Now, you guys were hit really, really hard at the very beginning of this up in
Mhm.
Seattle. What was life like for you at that time?
Yeah, so we had, I think, one of the first cases in the country was not far from us because they just, I don't know why the news would do this, but they celebrated, oh, it's been this many years since the first case of COVID in Washington and the nation. It's like, oh, that's cute. So it was bizarre. Like you were saying with the masks, some people were wearing them and nobody was wearing them here because we were just waiting because it was so flippy floppy of like wear a mask, don't wear a mask, wear a mask. And I remember calling my dad at one point. My dad's a safety manager for one of the cities here. And I was like, Dad, they're saying we're going to need masks. And he's like, no, 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 no. I don't see that. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm waiting. Like, he's like, I'm at the meeting that they're going to announce. And he's like, I don't think so. And literally like 10 minutes later, he calls me. He's like, okay, so I have a friend who's going to make us some masks. like, and from there, we started wearing them. And I had, at the time, my son was 4. Yeah, he was 4. And I was just thinking to myself, like, how am I going to get a 4-year-old to wear a mask? How am I going to get my 4-year-old to consistently wash his hands? How am I going to do this? Because in Washington, it was so strict from the beginning. It was so strict. And I know a lot of you that live in other parts of the country, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they did this and they did that. And living here, it's just become it's an everyday, like, it's just now a part of life. I mean, I don't think twice about putting on a mask. I don't think twice about excessively washing my hands. And yeah, it's just, even when things let up at one point at work, I remember right before the second variant came out, our work had us sign things of, oh, you're vaccinated. You don't have to wear your mask anymore. For like 2 whole weeks, we didn't have to wear masks. And it was so weird. It was so weird. So yeah, it's just living in a state that is so strict about it. It's just super interesting. And it really makes you think. Like, I did a lot of, I guess, soul searching is the word when we decided to go to Disneyland. When me and you and Courtney decided to go, it was like, okay, so what am I going to need to do to prepare to go on this vacation versus in the past, you don't even think about it. Like when you were there before it closed down, it's like, I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to go shower in a Wawa gas station. It's just bizarre. It's because you were in the parks or leaving Epcot when they announced Disney was closing. I remember I was watching Twitter and I was watching the news and they were announcing all the things you saw on your phone. And then seeing Disneyland closed was like, well, that's weird. And then Disney World shortly after. And it just made me think of the people in the parks like you. It's like, was there this collective like groan that came up from everybody standing in lines? Was there? And then it's, of course, like everyone's speculation of, oh, we'll be back in a week. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll be back. And then just counting down and counting down. And then the people who, I don't know if they did this in Disney World, but in Disneyland, I don't know if you saw the people who were literally just like camping out in front of the Disneyland gates with signs saying they needed to reopen Disneyland was just like, oh my gosh. And then they turned Disneyland, that whole Esplanade area became a vaccine center where they did free vaccines. They did all of that. So it's just seeing how they did to support kind of the whole pandemic we were in and how Disney did that without having the parks open. And then slowly, everything kept reopening. So it gave us everybody a little hope, right? It's definitely different on this side of the country.
Just thinking about your son who was 4 years old when this started, and everybody listening, just think for a couple minutes about how much you remember from before you were 4 years old. This is going to be so normal to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that just strikes me as so weird. Like his earliest memories are all going to be of masks and hand washing. And that's so strange. And I've never really thought about it that way before.
Yeah, it really is. And seeing pictures, I mean, I don't know how many people use the app Time Hop, but it shows you all the things you have saved and seeing all these pictures. And then all of a sudden it's like, bam, 2 years ago, everybody's face is covered in all these pictures. And it's so strange. But, I don't know how many other kids, I know he just took to it like it's it was no big deal. He was like, "Okay, whatever." And he became a mask shamer at 4, which was, fun at the grocery store when somebody didn't have a mask on correctly or at all. But it was but yeah, it's true. Thinking about that is he's always going to remember his younger childhood, and of course we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but he's always going to remember that time like we remember 9/11. He's going to remember the pandemic.
Well, I'm so old that I remember 9/11 a lot different than the pandemic. Like, I was already an adult with a job and responsibilities, but thanks for making me feel old, Sarah. On that
Hey,
note,
I was in high school.
it is always a pleasure to have you on, even if we're talking about something that's not all that fun, like the pandemic. But this means in a couple months, we're going to get to have an episode where I tell you about the reopening and how exciting that was and all the fun that I was able to have then. So thank you for being on the show again, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we continue, I just want to remind everyone that I'm doing something major in just a few months. In June and July, I'll be taking part in a 620-mile pilgrimage on the Ireland Way. In addition to my personal reasons, I'm also doing this to raise money and awareness for the nonprofit organization Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. I've been a volunteer at BTSADV for over a year, and I've seen all the great work they do for survivors and their families. There's a link in the description to donate, and I will not see a dime of what you donate. This is all for the organization. Anything you'd be willing or able to donate would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's keep the Walt Disney World discussion going with Marisa from Chicago. Always happy to have you here, Marisa.
Hello, hello.
So since we are now coming up on 2 years since the initial park closing for the pandemic, when everything reopened, there were a lot of changes that happened. And Marisa and I are just going to go over a couple of those changes. Some of them may have reverted back to the original way Disney did things. Some of them have turned into a third, completely different way of doing things. And we're just going to talk about how we feel about those changes and how we felt about some of them when they were actually happening. The first one I want to talk about, because you experienced both with this and now since they have gone away from it again, and that is temperature checks when you were entering the theme parks. When you had to do temperature checks, did you notice that really messing with your day at all?
I have to say it really didn't. They had a really good process, at least when I encountered it, where it moved you pretty quickly throughout the line. They had a bunch of different people in the tent so that they could just get as many people through as quickly as possible. So that was really not too bad of an interruption.
I actually found out through the course of that I have really low temperatures compared to everybody else in my group. There were a couple times that they had to test me a few times because my temperature was so low it didn't believe me. But I didn't really find that to be a hassle. The only time it ever really was bad was sometimes at Hollywood Studios because they were still doing boarding groups for Rise of the Resistance at the beginning, and everybody was getting there at the same time. So you would first have to go through the temperature check, and then you'd have to go through security, and then you'd have to stand and wait in line, and then they'd let you into the park, and then you'd have to wait for the boarding groups to go live. So that was the only time where I really had any sort of problem with the temperature checks. And the only other time I was a little worried about it was the day after I got my second shot, and I was worried that my temperature was going to go up because I was fighting off everything in the second shot, because that's how vaccines work. And I was afraid I was going to have a temperature there and I was going to have to leave because I got my vaccine. And I was meeting like 20 people at the park that day. So luckily, that didn't happen, and I had very few side effects for the vaccine, just on a complete side note. Something that became a much bigger focus for Walt Disney World after the parks reopened was mobile check-in. They had it for a little while, but now they're basically like, you have to do mobile check-in. How have you found mobile check-in? Because I've really enjoyed it.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. It keeps things a lot more simple. The ease of being able to do everything from your app where everything is stored anyway, and then being able to go straight to your room is so nice. You don't even have to stop at the front desk anymore if you don't want to. It's fabulous.
Yeah, this is a really good change. And I also even kind of like that they don't have mousekeeping coming into your room as often now. I know that may be a controversial opinion. Some people like to sort of be pampered and have a fresh, clean sheets and new towels and everything every day in their hotel. But I don't like the idea, even though I trust mousekeeping and that's not the issue, of people just coming into my hotel room every night. I liked that change as well, I'm going to be honest.
I agree with you. I think that, like you said, there are a lot of people who miss it, but I was one of those people who always declined mousekeeping when I was given the opportunity. So it didn't really interrupt my plans at all. And it was just that little extra peace of mind that I didn't have to worry about it.
And the way you vacation, this one really didn't affect you at all because you're always taking Disney transportation, but the parking lot trams, they're finally back at the TTC at Magic Kingdom, but they're not even back everywhere yet. This didn't really ever affect me because none of the parking lots are so big. I guess the TTC, depending on how crowded the day is, you might be parked pretty far away from the monorail. But I never used it at Epcot or Hollywood Studios, rarely used it at Animal Kingdom either. So this one really didn't affect me very much either. But I know a lot of people are really happy that those trams are starting to return, and especially people who have sort of mobility issues. Maybe they don't qualify for a handicapped parking space, but after walking around 7 miles in a Disney theme park all day, they didn't want to walk the extra half mile back to their car, and I understand that as well. Now we're going to get to the controversial ones. You've now had a lot of experience with this one, and that's the Park Pass reservation system. Anybody who doesn't know, ever since the parks reopened, you have to pick your theme parks in advance. Marissa and I are both annual pass holders, so we get 5 Park Pass reservations that we can have at any time unless we are staying on property. If you're staying on property, every day comes with a Park Pass reservation that you can make that doesn't count against your allotment from an annual pass. And if you're just buying day tickets, you get a Park Pass reservation for every day that you have a theme park ticket. How have you navigated the Park Pass reservation system? Has it ever been a problem for you? Were there ever days that you weren't able to get a park you wanted?
So this was something that I was very concerned about when it first happened because I was so worried that I would end up wanting to go to a park and not being able to. So far, I have not had that issue. Now, the way I vacation, I also am not local and I also stay on property. So I've never really had the issue of needing to book more passes than I was allotted. So that also changes my perception of it because I know there were a lot of specifically pass holders who were frustrated, especially back when it was only 3 reservations at a time. They felt they couldn't get enough reservations to make their annual pass worth it, especially when park capacity was lower. But now, especially that park capacity is higher, I'm seeing that even on the busy like run weekends that I'm going to, availability is still open for everything. So I'm not having any issue even, just last week going around and changing my dates. So that's been nice.
So overall, I'm actually a fan of the Park Pass reservation system because now if there's a really busy day, I'm going to give an example of Christmas Day, the notorious most busy day in all of Walt Disney World. If I make a Park Pass reservation for Magic Kingdom a couple months ahead of time for Christmas Day, I know I get to go to Magic Kingdom on Christmas Day, so I don't have to worry about getting there at 5 o'clock in the morning because the park's going to hit capacity and they're going to send me somewhere else. I end up only making Park Pass reservations far in advance if it is a special day, like I already have one for May the 4th at Hollywood Studios, because I know that's going to be in demand. If it's the first day of an Epcot festival, I'll make a reservation a few weeks, maybe a month or two in advance for that. If I know something's coming up, if they're bringing back the Festival of Fantasy parade like they did recently, I'll make a park pass reservation for the first day it's going to be there. And then I know that I can get there whenever I want, and I don't have to rush. I don't have to get there before it hits capacity. The last time I had any sort of problem with this was when they announced Disney Plus Day and all of the different things that were going to happen at Hollywood Studios because of Disney Plus Day. And the second they announced all the special things, all of the park pass reservations were gone for Hollywood Studios. But all I did was make one for Epcot, and then at 2 o'clock I walked over. Like, it's not really that big of a deal at this point. But yes, at the beginning, I was going in July of 2020 when they reopened, and there were days that I couldn't go to Magic Kingdom. It was hard to just get a park pass reservation for Hollywood Studios at the time. So taking all of that into consideration, I really do like the park pass reservation system. Now, the people who live in Orlando and are just used to leaving work and going straight to the parks whenever they feel like it, I can understand how they're frustrated with it, but it's even starting to look like, at this point, you can make an Epcot reservation on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to go at 5 o'clock that evening.
Yeah, it's definitely looking like as capacity continues to open up, these parks weren't hitting full capacity every day of the year before COVID. So it makes sense that they're still not going to hit full capacity now every day of the year. So hopefully, that holds true and it is a lot easier to make the day of reservation, even if it's just a couple hours in advance.
And if park pass reservations are a little bit controversial, this is the tip of the controversy iceberg, and that is fast passes are a thing of the past. And now they have implemented Genie Plus and Lightning Lane. It is a paid service now, no longer free fast passes like we had before. How has this affected the way that you travel?
It's frustrating, I think. I understand why they did it, and I understand that it holds a lot of value for a lot of people. As an annual pass holder who goes more frequently, I don't know if it holds value for me. So it's something that I don't know if I will necessarily pay for. And that does affect my touring because then I have to think about, okay, these are the rides I really want to prioritize. They typically get longer lines during this time of the day. Here's how I need to schedule my plans. And I can't depend on having a skip the line at any point in the day. If I wanted to do Genie Plus one day, I'm not ruling it out entirely. It could happen. What I refuse to do is the individual Lightning Lane. And that's just on principle. People love it. It's great for people who are coming on vacation and know they want to ride Rise of the Resistance and their trip won't be complete without it. This is a way to let them do that. But I'm holding out as long as I can without getting that.
So when you're down here in a couple weeks for the springtime surprise, and it's going to be loaded because it's a Run Disney weekend, and there's going to be people all over the place. They're going to want to get their Tower of Terror 10-miler metal picture in front of the Tower of Terror. So Hollywood Studios is going to be packed on that Sunday. You're telling me you don't get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and pay $15 to make sure that you get to ride Rise that day?
As of right now, that's not the plan. No, that could change. But, the one time I used Genie, I had so many issues with it. And then knowing that I will have other opportunities, I don't know. I don't want to say absolutely not because I could end up saying, you know what, I really do want to do this and it's $15. I only have to worry about paying for myself. I don't have, a family of 4 that I have to think about. So that changes it a lot as well. So I could make that spur of the moment decision and not have it affect my trip budget too much. But right now, that's not the plan. We'll see. I'll let you know.
We'll be on like mile 7 of the Tower of Terror 10-miler, and it'll be 6:45, and I'll turn to you and I'll be like, Marissa, come on, let's do it. Come on.
We'll be like trying to run and also book a time.
I will say that during the Wine and Dine 10K, while I was in between Hollywood Studios and Epcot running past the Boardwalk Resort, I did pull out my phone and make a boarding group for Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. So I would be willing to buy a lightning lane in the middle of a run. I'm
That's
not above that.
impressive. That's pretty impressive.
So this might surprise people, but I've actually never done Genie Plus for the day. I've never found that it would be worth it for me, although I know that I want to take a day and see how much I can do on Genie Plus so I can tell everybody if I think it's worth it. I am going to want to wait until maybe it's getting closer to the summertime in the spring when maybe the crowds are a little lower to see if I spend $15 and it's just me, can I get on a whole bunch of rides at Magic Kingdom, for example? But at this point, I haven't found it to be worth it for me. And one of the things I've noticed about how I visit theme parks now with Genie Plus is I am much less likely to get on rides. I just don't ride a lot of rides anymore. Recently, Courtney and I went to Epcot and we did not ride a single ride the entire day. We were there from like noon until closing, and we were gonna get on Spaceship Earth, but we were waiting around outside Spaceship Earth to see if they did the Rainbow Connection show with the projections and everything like that, and we waited too long and we weren't able to just hop in at 1 minute of closing. So I'm definitely riding things less when I'm at the theme parks. And I'll tell you the truth, I don't absolutely love that. Like, rides are a big part of the theme parks for me, and I really wish that it wasn't always a 90-minute wait for Big Thunder Mountain. You used to be able to hop on that in 25 minutes to a half hour. So there are some rides where it's definitely hurting the experience. Rise of the Resistance is always going to be a long line. It doesn't matter what you do. Until it calms down a little bit, Remy's Ratatouille Adventure is always going to be a long line, and then the brand new shiny thing like Guardians of the Galaxy will open, and then Remy's will be a 25-minute wait all day, every day. I have found it affects the way I visit the theme parks, and I have found that my friends are also planning their days differently and maybe doing less now that Genie Plus exists. So I do have to say I don't necessarily love it, and I was a defender of it at the beginning. I just haven't found that it's working the way I was expecting it to work when they announced it.
Yeah, that's kind of my experience as well. And also for me, one of the biggest frustrations I've had is you can't choose your time. You just have to do whatever the next return time is. I can't say like, okay, I want to ride Big Thunder around 1 o'clock, like I used to do for Fast Pass, and get a return time for then. If the next Big Thunder return time is 10:15, that's what I have to get. And so I found the day I did Genie, or the day I did Genie Plus, I found that that actually interfered. We had lunch plans and we had dinner plans that day, and that actually prevented us from getting more return times because the only return times that were showing up as the next available was during our reservation. So then we had to wait and refresh and refresh. And by the time we refreshed, the only ones available were like 4 hours later in the evening. So I think that's a pretty easy fix that they could do that I think might help the user experience a lot more.
I always like to end on a positive note, and this is going to be a big time positive, I believe, is with reopening in 2020, they instituted character cavalcades, which were small parades that went through. At the beginning, it was at Epcot. I haven't noticed them at Epcot in a very, very long time. There's some at Hollywood Studios that go up Hollywood Boulevard and then break down and leave sort of around Star Tours. Obviously, the ones in Magic Kingdom that start in Frontierland and make their way through Liberty Square and down Main Street, USA. And I think the coolest ones are at Disney's Animal Kingdom when the characters are on boats that go around Discovery River, around Discovery Island. I know we both love these, but it's almost hard to envision the parks without them. Like, it's hard to remember how we went theme park days without having these. It seems like such a natural idea and something they should have been doing the whole time.
Absolutely. It's so wild to think that, it used to be the set parade time and that was it. And now it's so much fun having these little mini parades that you get to see so much more frequently. and you can just kind of stumble upon them and get a little bit of that character interaction and character fun. And you don't have to set aside, 40 minutes in advance, go stake out your spot so you can see the parade. It's less of a disruption to your day, but it adds a lot more entertainment at the same time.
Yeah, I love these for all the reasons that you just mentioned. You just see them happening and you don't have to stake out that spot. Even when you're watching them, Festival of Fantasy is a long parade. You're standing there for quite some time. You're in the heat. You were in the heat waiting for it, and then you're in the heat watching it, and then it's over and you almost need a break. A parade and these cavalcades are supposed to be the break. It's supposed to be something that you just stop and go, oh my goodness, this is so cool. And you take your pictures and you see the character that maybe you're not going to get to see in a meet and greet, and they go past you and then you move on to the next thing. So I think this is really perfect.
Yeah, it's just such a great little blip of entertainment for your day. The Magic Kingdom ones, especially, the music is so catchy, but like in a fun way. So, you see the cavalcades of them, it gets stuck in your head. So then you're singing along next time you see it, which is just such a little added bit of fun.
I'm convinced that Disney created the Rainy Day Cavalcade song when they were trying to find a way to torture prisoners or something, because it is such an earworm that just me mentioning it now, it will be in my head for the entire rest of the day. There is one last thing that I wanted to mention before we let things go, because this is something I also really liked, and it kind of is going back to the reservation check-in, and that is the intense focus on mobile ordering for food at quick service locations. How do you feel about this one, Marissa?
I'm a big fan of it. I know that there are some people who prefer to pay in cash who are not a big fan of the system because it kind of forces you to use a gift card or a credit card or something. But I think it's so convenient just being able to order on my phone and then I go pick it up when it's ready. It's a streamlined process and I really like it. The only downside I would say is when everything was just reopening, they wouldn't even let you go like sit somewhere or enter the location before your order was ready, which could be frustrating as you're like, okay, my order is going to be ready in 2 minutes. I want to go like grab a table and then go grab my food. But that really hasn't been as much of an issue lately. So, all positives from here on out, I have to say.
I have found that there are days that things have definitely gone wrong. I've ordered something in a window and then I get there in that window and it takes 45 minutes past the window for me to get my food. We have a mutual friend on Twitter, Ken. He's an awesome guy. He planned out his entire day on the day of the 50th. He got up bright and early when you were able to start making mobile orders, and he planned out his entire day, and he was always waiting there the second that he could put it in, and he was already by lunch 4 hours behind. Like, they were not going to be able to get his food to him, so he had to keep canceling them, and it was just a big disaster. I've had situations where that has happened. I've had situations at Disneyland where I mobile ordered something and I was waiting at the restaurant for my order to be done. Somebody walked up to the register, ordered, paid, and got their item before I got the one where I mobile ordered. So it's not a perfect system, but I will say, like you've said, I do like the convenience. When it's working, it works really, really well. When you can be in line for Big Thunder Mountain and you're like, I'm going to order from Pecos Bills, so the second I get off this roller coaster, I can hit I'm here and my food will be ready right when I get there. Those are the things that I really like to do. And another area where it's really convenient is with the specialty treats. If you're just ordering a cupcake from a location, they just have them sitting in a fridge. So the second you put that you're mobile ordering them, you start walking there, tell them you're there, and it'll be sitting there waiting for you when you get there. It is really convenient in those situations.
It's also, I've found really convenient in Epcot, places like the Caramel Shop in Germany that I can't pronounce the name of. I love that caramel popcorn. That's another thing where they're making it and they're preparing it. And I've been able to bypass this insane looking line to just walk right in and pick up my popcorn and walk right out. And people are looking at you like, how did you just do that? Did you just take that from somewhere? And you're like, mobile ordered it. So that's really nice because it saved me like easily half an hour in line. But I do understand that if it's not working as intended, it can get really frustrating really quickly, especially when you're hungry.
And they take your money right when you submit it. So if something goes wrong, you don't find it out until you have to get a refund. So that can be a little bit of a pain as well. Marisa, thank you so much for being here. So glad that the parks are working a little more normally now. We're not back to normal yet, but things are starting to move in that direction, and that's really exciting. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, looking forward to seeing what the future brings.
For Marisa from Chicago and Sarah from Seattle, I'm Rick Doherty, and this has been episode 58 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. I'll be back next Thursday when we celebrate St. Patrick's Day with a more detailed conversation about my upcoming trip to Ireland. Until then, have a great week.